All right, and you guys can't stop asking questions about food safety in the U.S., and we're following your clicks and curiosity, and it looks like you guys want to know about the safeguards in place and more about health policies under the Trump administration. So let's break it down. We've got Christina Jewett up first, and then our Sony Salzman. Y'all, thank you so much for being here. Let's start with recalls and food safety in the U.S. with New York Times healthcare reporter Christina Jewett. Christina, thank you so much for being here. You recently co-wrote a piece called How Cyclospora Evaded the U.S. Food Safety System to Sicken Thousands. We've covered those outbreaks in depth, but what did your reporting actually find?
What we found was that about 30 months ago, the Trump administration delayed a rule that would have made companies like Taco Bell, which is where this outbreak was first detected, report really thorough information to federal officials who are trying to trace this back. So we found that there were requests for this information starting on July 1st, July 3rd, July 8th. It wasn't until the 13th that the FDA actually got this information to enable them to really trace back where the cyclospora came from. And there are some people who think that if that rule hadn't been delayed, the rule required that reporting within 24 hours, that we could have ended this a lot sooner and gotten that lettuce off the shelves.
Yeah, what did you hear from food safety experts, especially about the impact of the delay of that federal rule?
I mean, they thought it was significant. I mean, this rule was like a decade in the making. People were, very concerned that these outbreaks that every day could be, lives saved, hospitalizations prevented. So they really fought hard to get this, they call it traceability requirement put in place. And so it was a big surprise. I actually wrote a story when it happened last year that this requirement was delayed. It was supposed to take effect last year. Now it doesn't take effect until 2028.
Yeah, Christina, your report focuses on cyclospora, but it's not just cyclosporiasis, right? We've seen recall after recall for things like potential E. coli or salmonella exposure. What does this say about food safety safeguards as they are right now in the United States?
I mean, I think the fact that we care and we pay so much attention to them means that the federal government could invest more. And if they did, would that mean we would detect more and feel like food is less safe? Potentially. But every time there's one of these big outbreaks, I usually take sort of a deep dive or a dig into it. And you find a lot of, rules that should have been in place that weren't in place, or you find warning signs, like with the boar's head, the listeria on the deli meat, a lot of problems in that facility and a lot of warning signs that things were problematic. So, I think our food supply, the FDA will say, they often say our food supply is overwhelmingly safe, taken as a whole. And statistically, when you think about 350 million people and how much we all eat every day, statistically, I mean, I think that that's not a crazy thing for them to say, but these get our attention. When you say explosive diarrhea, it gets everyone's attention.
Yeah, when you've been on the ground reporting on this issue, what do you understand are the major hurdles that the FDA is now facing with all these issues, especially why it feels like they're kind of drinking through a fire hose right now with sort of different kinds of outbreaks popping up, right?
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of rules in place, and the rules really put a heavy emphasis on the companies to basically sort of like know what the risks are that are specific to their food supply, and then to basically take care of business, make sure that the risks are managed. And that's kind of like a vague, broad thing that the companies are really responsible for. So the FDA doesn't go in and, fine companies. They don't go shut down food suppliers. You just don't ever hear of that. So, I mean, I think, what Congress hands them in terms of like the power to, really police the food supply, I mean, potentially could be a little bit stronger.
For sure. Christina Jewett, really appreciate your reporting. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's bring in ABC News Med Unit producer Sony Salzman. Sony, appreciate you being here. What is the Trump administration saying about the recent list of recalls announced by the FDA? Have cuts sort of impacted the government's response? What do you know?
Yeah, I mean, look, for context here, these bugs, things like salmonella, E. coli, they're really hard to avoid. The CDC estimates that 48 million people are sickened with foodborne illness every year. And so the question here isn't really about, like, did the government cause the outbreaks? It's whether or not these rules, as Christina was just alluding to, or these steep personnel cuts have hampered the response. So Secretary Kennedy has defended the administration's handling of the most recent recent outbreaks. And he really pushed back on the idea that personnel cuts have made this situation worse.
I see. So, Sony, break this down for me, because it feels like it all comes on the heels of this Make America Healthy Again movement. So what is the administration actually saying about the MAHA movement and its policies, and what are the efforts on food quality as it pertains to Kennedy's MAHA movement?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, two separate things. The food recalls that we've been talking about, totally separate from the MAHA agenda called, that's focused on ultra-processed food. And this actually enjoys bipartisan support, excuse me. So Americans get more than half of their calories from ultra-processed food. The administration's major effort here has been effectively to kind of pressure private companies to remove some of these additives, fillers, some of these controversial ingredients that have been banned in other countries. This is an effort to make that packaged food a little bit healthier, right? And just yesterday, General Mills announced that Lucky Charms, Trix, some of their favorite cereals, these are now going to be free of artificial colors. So it's kind of the latest example of a major food company aligning with the administration's stated goal here.
Right, and Sony, we've seen that the HHS has lacked sort of leadership across the board. That's changing now. You've had a new leadership sort of shakeup. How are they tasked with implementing the standards that MAHA is trying to embody?
Yeah, so that's right. Two big jobs. The CDC director was confirmed earlier this month. The FDA director has been nominated, not yet confirmed. But, both leaders will be tasked with operationalizing the MAHA policies, right? And that can be a really tricky tightrope to walk, as prior leaders have experienced, because on the one hand, you have very popular policies, like a lot of these food policies around ultra-processed food, but then on the other hand, you have very controversial policies, like some of the administration's efforts to restrict or limit vaccines, which of course, that's in the context of the fact that polling shows a majority of Americans support vaccines, and it's against the backdrop of, universal outcry from doctors.
It's a tightrope, and we'll keep walking it. Sony, appreciate you so much.